Hey everyone, welcome back to the Pathways to Happiness podcast. My name is Nena Lavonne. I am a life coach that specializes in life transformation and personal development. And today we are going to talk about rising above living a mediocre life, letting go of the idea that it's okay to just survive life, and how to start not only thriving, but also living a life that is truly exceptional because it is well lived and intentionally designed. So, as always, I want to take a quick moment to thank you all for your support both here and on the Nena Lavonne YouTube channel. I am continuously impressed by your comments and your questions, and I feel so much gratitude for this amazing community. So, again, thank you so much for subscribing and for your sincere desire to live your best life possible. It is truly awesome to witness. So, that being said, let's jump right into today's topic because I find it incredibly interesting and something that I can personally relate to, and really the reason I became a life coach in the first place, because I saw it as like an epidemic that was all around me. It honestly doesn't matter how good your life looks on the outside if on the inside you are either too busy to live it, or you've lost interest in it, or it was never that inspiring to begin with. So today we're going to talk about what a mediocre life really is, how to tell if our lives fall into this category, and if so, how to get our lives moving out of the mediocre and into the exceptional. So if you listen to the podcast a lot, you know that I like to give a definition whenever possible, just so we're all kind of on the same page whenever we are talking about a specific topic. So I went and I looked up the definition for the word mediocre, which actually made me laugh out loud. And the definition it offered was not very good. So that's exactly right. A mediocre life is not very good. It's not bad, it's just not very good. So, mediocre comes from the Latin word mediocris, which translates to mean halfway up a rocky mountain. And I think that really explains it perfectly. Halfway living, halfway experiencing this beautiful life, that we are settling for something that is inferior to what we are capable of. And I feel that this describes so many of us, that there is so much talent, so much potential out there, so many chances to live a happy and fulfilling life. But more often than not, we simply don't take these chances. We keep doing whatever it is we usually do time after time, even when we know 100% that it doesn't lead us to where we really want to go. If it leads us to a place of mediocrity, then we are more often than not pretty okay with that. And that's because we aren't outright miserable. There could be worse things, and we are tired or we're comfortable. So we stick there, and it's really kind of a cultural phenomenon. So that means even as a society, we are leaving so much on the table. And I've totally been there where it just seems like getting going in a different direction would take way too much work, and that there's no real urgency in making changes. So again, we just stay where we are. And the problem is, at least for me, that when we think this way, years can go by, literally years, of nothing in particular really happening, nothing that really excites us or drives us or gives us passion. So for so many of us, we end up getting into the routine of wake up, work, television, sleep, and then repeat. And there you go. That's your day. And then that becomes your life. It doesn't matter if we are married or have children, or if we are young, or if we are old, if we're rich or we're poor. We get hooked into a routine and it just kind of replays day after day. And this wouldn't be a problem if the routine was one that had us leaping out of bed in the morning, but it really just does not. And one of the major problems that I've noticed with living a mediocre life is that it causes major chronic internal conflict. We will have endless negative emotions. We will make excuses. We will blame other people. We will look for ways to distract ourselves or to self-medicate because we want to push the entire concept away. We don't want to think of ourselves as not living the best life that we could. And when that is actually happening, we certainly don't want to take credit for it. And sometimes when we do take credit for it, instead of taking action or fixing the issues, we just let it spiral into a pit of despair. So mediocrity can actually be very painful. Now, a while ago, I came across a video clip from MJ DeMarco. You may already know him, or if not, his name might sound familiar because I recently did a video about action faking where I mentioned several of his quotes. So he is a brilliant author, and in this video clip, he offered 6 questions that were meant to help us find out if we were destined for mediocrity. And 4 of those questions really stood out to me, so I wanted to share them. And I definitely suggest checking out more of his material when you have the time. The other 2 questions more had to do with financial mediocrity, which is not really something I wanted to discuss today. So that's the reason why I'm not including them in this podcast. But I'm going to go ahead and give you those 4 questions. And then I wanted to give you my own take and some of the more subtle and some of the not so subtle reasons and factors that can often make us feel that our life is less than what it could be. So let's start out with these 4 questions from MJ DeMarco. So the first thing he asks is, do you have an irrational emotional attachment to hyper reality? So this is something that you perceive as real, but isn't. It is a cultural mirage, some kind of simulation of reality. So he says that these could be in the forms of concepts, let's say, such as feeling that we must work from Monday to Friday. So there's no real reason why Monday or Wednesday would be different from Saturday or Sunday, but these are life rules that we impose on ourselves that really just set us back because they aren't true universal laws. They're just man-made rules that we have the tendency of not questioning. So he is saying that a lot of times we really constrict ourselves to live within the boundaries of these types of concepts. He also suggests that they can take the form of entertainment. So these attachments could be for Star Wars or Game of Thrones or for different sports teams. So he's saying that these things can become part of our life and actually becomes more important than aspects of our real life. So we think about it and we talk about it. And I think the distinction is that he is making is actually between enjoying something and getting value from it versus becoming obsessed with it or having it occupy a great quantity of our thoughts. Escapism is different than entertainment. We essentially want our life to be the main attraction and these other things to have very minor roles. So in other words, if all people know about us is that we're really into Breaking Bad or the Red Sox or whatever, it might be a sign that we have irrational emotional attachments, according to MJ DeMarco. Okay, his second question to whether or not we are destined for mediocrity is if we have read less than 12 books this year, or I guess we could say last year. So our knowledge today will never be enough for tomorrow. While I don't specifically think it has to be books, I think it can be more about staying curious and gathering knowledge in any way we can, as often as we can. I personally love reading, but if you are really resistant to it, I think podcasts or seminars or other resources can certainly count. But we need to keep learning. So not only because it's important for survival and for growth, but it is also directly linked with life satisfaction. And that's something that I talk about in a lot of podcasts because it is simply a reality. And staying stagnant can make anybody feel unhappy and absolutely can be tied to having a life that feels mediocre. Okay, his third question is, do you have a fixed mindset? So this would be as opposed to a growth mindset. So, do you feel that luck or talent will determine success? Do you feel that you can't do better than what you are doing now? You might feel like you can't do things because you aren't automatically good at them, or that they are too hard, or you don't feel passionately about them yet. A fixed mindset is one that is unwilling to do things in any other way or believe that other ideas could be effective or true. So, the pursuit of growth is essential for leaving mediocrity behind. So, a question we can ask ourselves daily is, am I better today than yesterday? When we have a growth mindset, we are always focused on expansion. So, I definitely agree with him there. Okay, and the fourth question that he asks is, do you lack a meaning or purpose? And this is one I personally say over and over, so I could not agree more. We absolutely need to have a why. When we do not have a why, we completely lack motivation because all the work needed to accomplish goals or to move forward seems way too hard. There needs to be meaning behind it. It needs to be significant in our life. It needs to matter whether or not we reach these goals. So, if that is not the case, it is very likely that yes, we will be able to stay with the status quo. And honestly, that would not be problematic except for the fact that most people's status quo is, like we said at the beginning, not that great. So, those are some of his questions, but there are several other culprits behind a life that isn't fully lived that I really wanted to mention. And I wanted to talk about the things that we can do to actually correct these things. So, the first one is laziness. It seems so obvious, and it is because it's true. When we have the mindset that we will only take what is given to us, or we don't want to put effort into life, guess what's going to happen? We get handed a life that we really aren't interested in, that we didn't design, that we likely don't care enough about. A good life is not equivalent to an easy life, and I can tell you firsthand that sometimes life requires some pretty significant sacrifices if you want to eventually get to where you want to be. Nobody gets to only do the things that they feel like doing. And when they try to do that, it becomes impossible to have a life that is rewarding, happy, or fulfilling. So I think laziness is a big culprit in this, whether we like to hear that or not. Another thing that can happen is that we aren't fully enjoying the moment. We are distracted, or we are filling our life with garbage that is nothing but time wasters. I think this could tie into MJ DeMarco's point of being overattached to things that are essentially not that important, or that we are making more important than really appropriate, or we are spending our entire lives worrying about the future or ruminating about the past. There's really no way to have an exceptional life if we are never living in the moment at hand. And I think this is a big one for a lot of people. And that's where the concept of mindfulness really comes in. Being mindful and being in the present moment is a huge key to happiness. And when we have a happy life, we are certainly not having a mediocre life. So that's a huge at the complete sacrifice of our own happiness, but certainly we wouldn't be able to do that for everybody. And that makes zero sense at all anyway, because again, this is our life to lead. And I really feel that we are hooked on external validation these days, and we are overly concerned with creating this picture perfect version of our life and with staying inside everybody else's boundaries. And let me tell you firstly that no one wins in this situation. They do not know what is best for our lives. only we can have this information because we are the ones that are actually living this life. We are the ones that have the hopes and the goals and the dreams, and the rest of the world, they are just busy with their own life. When we care too much about the opinions of others, by default, we are letting them design our life. And unless we think that their life is super amazing and is absolutely perfectly suited for who we uniquely are, which will never be the case, it's just not a good idea. This is a first class ticket to Mediocreville, so that's definitely something that we want to try to avoid. The fourth thing is a combination of perfectionism and being afraid of failure. So, kind of the same thing. Perfectionism is really based on fear in the first place. But we have to understand that we're never going to live a life that is perfect, and no one's really asking us to live a life that is perfect. And failure is just honestly a part of the human experience. If we attempt to live a life that does not include failure, it is just going to confine us into this little bubble of activities and rituals and routines that we are comfortable with, and that we feel that there is really no threat of failure, which leads us to not only live just a mediocre life, but a life that really is completely uninspiring because it's way too safe. So that leads me into number 5, which is not taking risks. So we do need to take leaps of faith. We need to roll the dice sometimes, not in life and death situations, but in some situations. Small doses. It keeps life exciting, and the results can be extraordinary. So I always say high risk, high reward, which is not really a rule of thumb. We don't want to always be taking risks, but in some calculated cases, risk can lead to exceptional results. And being so afraid of risk really goes back to being afraid of failure and perfectionism, because we are afraid of looking bad. We are afraid of losing what we have. But we have to remember that if what we have isn't that great to begin with, it's really worth it in a lot of cases to take these calculated risks when they are appropriate. So that's something to think about as well, because that's something that can certainly block us from living our best life when we are not willing to really step out of the comfort zone and take some risks at some times in our life. The next thing can be not taking enough me time, never unplugging, never connecting with our own true selves and sitting in quiet time. So if we are not really spending time in self-reflection, we're not going to be very self-aware. And when we are not self-aware, it's very difficult for us to build a life that is beyond mediocre, because we don't really know ourselves. We don't know what we like. We know what we're comfortable with, which is certainly not the same as, leading an exceptional life, but we don't know ourselves to the point where we can have a pretty good idea what will make our hearts sing, what will make us feel inspired, what will make us feel excited, what will make us really jump out of bed in the morning. We don't know these things because we don't know ourselves. So we need to take time to just sit with ourselves. We want to make sure that we are turning off the phone, that we are not answering immediately every phone call, every email, not allowing people to constantly be able to get in touch with us, because when we always make ourselves available, everybody else's priorities become much more important than our own priorities just by default, because there's no time to even think about what we want to do or what's important to us, because the rest of the world is constantly telling us what is important to them, and we get conditioned to put those needs first. So we have to put our own needs first at some point, but we can't do that when we don't know what our needs are. So again, time away from the phone, time away from social media, time away from television, time away from the opinions of other people and all the chaos. We need time with ourselves. If we're going to build a life that is truly something that is enriching and fulfilling to us, again, we need to know what is truly valuable to us. And honestly, most people do not. That's one of the first things we talk about when a person starts as a client, as a life coach. We talk about life direction and goals and dreams, and so many people have no idea because they don't know themselves. So we have to start with that fundamental knowledge before we can get to a place that we ultimately want to be. Okay, I love number 7, which is forgetting that we are important, that our lives are important and short, that we would never have been put on this earth to live an uninspired life that is consisting of only rituals and routines and being tired all the time and just be constantly fulfilling obligations that we don't really care about. We have to remember that our lives are sacred and that this world is actually amazing. And if it doesn't seem amazing, it's because, again, we are just living this mediocre life that is not allowing us to feel the inspiration to even be able to look around and notice how incredible so many aspects of this planet actually are. There are so many things to be excited about, but when we forget that this world is important, that our lives are important, and that we should be living exceptional lives, then we get into that pattern of mediocrity. So we just have to remember our own importance, remember our values. No matter what we think about ourselves, we have to know fundamentally that we are truly, truly important. And the next one kind of is related to that, and that is that we keep our lives too small. And I think a lot of times it comes down to being told that our life should be small or seeing other people live small lives. And we think that is what we do as humans, but that is simply not the case. We need to be curious. We need to explore. We need to travel. We need to learn. We need to, again, always expand our life. Most people not only keep their life small, but their life gets smaller and smaller as they go. So we need to do exactly the opposite if we really want a life that is far from mediocre. And that leads me into the next one again, which is we need to look for the magic in this world. And this is something that I made a video about on my YouTube channel because this is something that I feel is often overlooked. And I think it is so important. We need to think about the things that are mysterious, the unusual, the things that we don't find in, everyday life or in social media, the things that we only notice when we don't have our earbuds in. We need to have a childlike wonder. We need to really seek out the strange, the unusual, the weird, and, consider the big questions. Think about the things that are essentially unknowable, but yet so important. There is so much magic and mystique in this world, and we need to use it as a fuel, as a passion for our life. And that's something that is extremely important to me. I always talk about how when I grew up, I believed I was living in a haunted house, and how on one hand that terrified me, but on the other hand, it was something that gave me this interest in life because I felt that there was this layer that I didn't know about, that there could potentially be more than meets the eye. And while it is greatly in question that I actually lived in a haunted house growing up, I definitely do believe that there is much more than meets the eye to this world, no matter what you believe, no matter what your religion is or your sense of spirituality, just the sense that there is So many factors in this world that we simply don't know, and that is exciting and that makes life interesting. So we can't let go of that magic, of that wonder, because certainly when we do, again, that makes life seem extremely boring and extremely mediocre. The 10th thing is something that I see so much, especially recently, and that is that we don't consider new ideas. We have what's called a confirmation bias, which means that we have a formed opinion about most things in life, whether it was given to us by our parents or our school teachers or our life experiences, whatever it is. We form these opinions that become how we view the world, which is very natural. But what happens is we don't question them later on, and we actually continuously seek out information to confirm what we already believe. We do this much more so than we consider new ideas. So what happens when we do this, when we are always just looking for confirmation that we are correct, is that we can't grow. Of course we can't grow because we are just building on those same facts, which could be valid, but could be based in nothing. So many of the things that we believed at age 4. But as human beings, we need to constantly be questioning our ideas. We need to be seeking out truth, and we can't seek out truth when we are just seeking to constantly be right. And let's face it, we aren't always right. We are humans. We make mistakes. We're right sometimes, but we're certainly not right all the time. And when we consider new ideas, that gives us so much interest in life because we learn, we grow and we learn, and that makes life that much more interesting and desirable to live in. Number 11 is that we forget that we actually do have control over our lives and our reactions. So a lot of times we feel helpless, and that's why we feel that it is okay for us to stay in a mediocre life, because we feel like we are a victim. We have this victim mentality that we have this lot in life and there's nothing that we can do about it, and so we don't allow ourselves to take any type of action to make any meaningful change in our life. And the fact of the matter is that no, we can't always change what happens to us. We have experiences that do happen, but we always, always, always can change how we feel about them, what our reactions to them are, and how we respond to these different experiences. We are never truly a victim. We always have power to change. We always have the ability to take control of our life. And so that's something that maybe fear keeps us away from doing, but we have to know that that power truly does lie within us. So we can look all through history of the terrible things that have happened and the amazing people that were able to rise above these situations. These people were not superheroes. They're just people like you and I. But they took a situation and they said, this does not define me. I can take a step forward. I can change my life. And we all truly have that ability. So we just have to, again, remember that we do have control of our life. And again, certainly how we react to situations and how we perceive situations. We can always reframe things. We can always look for positives. We can always look for lessons. And there is never a punch that life gives us that we aren't able to get up from if we truly want to do it. And the last one is a big one, and that is that we don't believe that we can do better. So remember, we talked about those limiting beliefs at the beginning of the podcast, and that's what it really comes down to. So if you aren't familiar with that term, I have a video on that on the Nena Lavonne YouTube channel that you can look up. But basically, limiting belief is a conviction or a state of mind or a belief that we have that we truly believe to be true that is limiting us in some way, keeps us confined in some way. This limiting belief could be about ourselves. It could be about other people or how we interact with other people, or it could be about how we feel this world is really composed of. And it can have a lot of negative effects in our life and can certainly keep us from moving forward because we feel that we're simply not able to because we are so constrained. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you think about it, our life is really a reflection of how we feel about our own selves. And when we don't feel that we can do better, we're not going to do better, and we're certainly not going to try because we have this belief that we are less than in some way. We feel that, yes, other people, they can have this great and wonderful life, but not us. We always think that we are the exception, that we are less than, that we are not good enough, and that there are all these reasons that we believe that we should have this miserable or mediocre life. So limiting beliefs are a huge setback, but luckily, limiting beliefs are things that we can change. And again, if that's not a topic you are familiar with, please do go find that clip. If you're watching this podcast through YouTube, I will go ahead and link it down below because when we realize that we can really shatter these limiting beliefs and really understand that we are limitless as people, think about how much further we can, of course, go in our life. So if any of these ring a bell, you are in good company. These are all things that so many of us can relate to. In fact, most of the world is living in mediocrity, whether they realize it or not. And this is why we need to dare to be different than the rest of the world. And I actually have a favorite quote about this by Mark Twain. And oh my goodness, I love his quotes. He has so many insightful things to say. He was an incredibly intelligent and amazing person. So if you're not familiar with his work beyond, Huck Finn and all that stuff, I would definitely look up some of his other works. But this quote is, "Whenever you find yourself on the side of the majority, it is time to pause and reflect." And I think this is incredibly true in this situation because the majority of people in this world might be living lives that are mediocre, but we don't have to. We don't have to be like other people. We can go against the grain. We can be authentic. We can be true to ourselves. We can dare to dream and let go of the fear of making mistakes. We can decide to make wise choices between doing what we think we are supposed to do and what we really want to do deep down. We can learn that having a life that we love is more important than other people loving it. And we can motivate ourselves to begin to take steps in the direction of where we really want to go. So at the end of our lives, we don't want to have regrets. We don't want to feel that we did nothing but really wasted time. We want to feel that we used our gifts and our talents and that we explored this world with a curious heart and that we looked for insight and knowledge and truth and deeper meaning. And all these things are completely in our hands. We always have the power to live a life that is exceptional. Life is way too precious to spend even one more minute in mediocrity. So that is where I'm going to leave it for today. But I hope we all take time to reflect and think about whether or not we are living a mediocre life. Could we do more? Could we have a life that is more joyful and meaningful and fulfilling? And if the answer is yes, are we willing to do what's necessary to really make those meaningful changes in our life? So again, that's where I'm going to leave it. But please remember that once a month, I always do a questions and answers podcast. And I believe we have one coming up in a week or two. So definitely get any questions that you might have to me. You can reach me by email at nena.lavonne@gmail.com, and you can always reach me on Twitter, and my Twitter handle is at Nena Lavonne. So I thank you so much for joining me today. It's always such a pleasure to have the opportunity to spend time with you. And I thank you for spending time with me. Go ahead and become a subscriber if you aren't already. We definitely want you to stay connected. And I truly hope the rest of your day is absolutely extraordinary. See you next time, guys.